Welcome to Crime Corner Investigates. We're gonna go into a part 3 of a series of the murder of Charlie Kirk. If you've never been to my channel before, I investigate true crime murders by digging into timelines. I like timelines, early timelines before the murder, during the murder, or after. Sometimes the media injects things that are false narratives, and it can sway what the public thinks about certain cases. Right now, I'm following the Tyler Robinson case, the Luigi Mangione case. I have a community tab about what just happened with the Mangione case. If you want to read that in a poll, it's on my account. Let's see, and I'm also following the Nancy Guthrie case. I have several videos with the Nancy Guthrie case, and I have several videos of the Mangione case too, and the Charlie Kirk case, Tyler Robinson case. But it's going to be a 3-part series. Part 1, I go into the timeline of the day of the murder of Charlie Kirk, and part 2, I go into the security failures, a possible motive, and how the crime scene was staged, and who was capable of doing it. So this is part 3. I will put in the links for part 1 and 2, but if you look at my channel, that's what I was trying to think of. If you look at my channel, you'll find the community tab about the Mangione case, and you'll also see part 1 and part 2 on my channel. I usually put references at the end of in my video. If you look under the general portion of it after the title, and so if you want to do further research. Now, most of the things that I post are just my opinion and for entertainment value. Do your own research. I'll have reference links so that you can do your own research, but I'm just looking at theories. So let's keep that in mind. As we do talk about Tyler Robinson, he is innocent until proven guilty. So I normally don't say Tyler Robinson did this or that. It's usually the suspect. My goal is to understand who is injecting information into the media and why. And I look at facts, and some things in the media aren't always facts, but I look at timelines, even going back a long time, which we're going to talk about today, that can show a pattern, that can show some red flags. Let's see. Because my videos are unique and different than other true crime videos, hit like and subscribe so that I get into the algorithm. I post a lot of videos that no one else is posting, so mine are a little off the beaten path and different. But today we're going to talk about the Tyler Robinson case. Part 1, like I said, is a deep dive into the timeline. Part 2 is a staging theory that was someone that had motive and means to carry out the murder. And today we're going to talk about part 3. Let's just recap part 2 for those that haven't seen it. I go into detail about security failures, who had the biggest motive to kill Charlie Kirk, and who was capable of staging the murder and setting up Tyler Robinson. We're going to talk about in part 3 how Charlie Kirk was standing in the way of Russia relieving its economic tensions from the sanctions that several countries had on them. And Russia's history of being a mafia state, and who George Zinn is. We're going to deep dive into him and his relationship with the marathon bombing incident in 2013, which was a red flag for me. Now, it might not be for you, but we'll go over what I found. But back to the biggest motive is money, which is Russia and oil. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's why it's part 3. I might go into other theories of motives. But right now I'm stuck on this one because there's a lot of information. Okay, just a recap. Charlie Kirk was shot Wednesday, September 10th, 2025 at 12:23 at Turning Point, USA in a courtyard at Utah Valley University. It was a single bullet. It was fired from the rooftop approximately 150 yards away. The suspected shooter supposedly is Tyler Robinson, and his trial will be coming up soon. They're going to decide whether there's going to be a trial. We had the preliminary hearing last month, and I would venture to say they're going to take it to trial because there's overwhelming evidence that he did it. But if you look at my staging theory in part 2, you can see that it's possibility that he didn't, and a lot of people don't think that he did. So Tyler Robinson surrendered, and there is evidence in the media that his mother noticed him on video. I don't know if that's true. I do know this. I am following the Luigi Mangione case, and his mother, a detective, said that his mother said she could see him doing that. And apparently his attorneys tracked down that detective, and it was a false statement. It wasn't true. He never even talked to her. So that came out with his attorneys in the preliminary hearings or before the preliminary hearings. They nipped that in the bud. So it's kind of very similar. Oh, the mother. Well, it's the same thing with the marathon bombing. Is the mother said the same thing. So it's kind of funny that there's similarities in all 3 of these cases. But the Luigi Mangione case, the mother nipped that in the bud. She never said that. And they tracked down how it got twisted in the media. So people do inject things in the media to start some silly motive. Of course, if the mother thinks he did it, he did it. What mother, even if their son did it, would go to the media and say, oh my God, yeah, he's not crazy, number one. Neither is Mangione. They don't have a history of mental illness. So that's a red flag to me. I'm sorry. That's a red flag. I see a lot of red flags, and I'll say I see a red flag. He faces, though, multiple capital and felony charges, including aggravated murder, felony discharge of a firearm, armed obstruction of justice, and witness tampering. Now, George Zinn made a false confession within minutes after the shooting and was arrested. But he said, I shot him, now shoot me. A detective who had been near the back of the venue heard what sounded like a gunshot. Now it says gunshot, not rifle. I'm just saying. That's what he said. And he moved into the fleeing crowd and was approached by Zinn, who yelled that he had not shot the person and told the officer to shoot him too. He didn't have a gun on him. So he's just like, pretty much, shoot me, I did it. But he doesn't have a gun on him. The officer said he could see Zinn's hands and no weapon, handcuffed him, and asked where the gun was. Zinn refused to say. Court documents quote the officer's account almost verbatim, noting Zinn continued to state that he shot the individual and just to shoot him as he was being escorted to the patrol car. Now, when I was watching the preliminary hearing, there was a security person that was trying to help with the crowd because of the shooting, and he seen a holster, a gun holster on the ground, did not pick it up because he heard on the radio the suspect had been arrested. That would be Zinn. So by all accounts, he interfered and the real shooter got away. Now it's the suspicion is that it's Tyler because he's might be going to trial, but my staging theory is that it wasn't Tyler. So was he trying to deter from people finding out who the real shooter was when he yelled that? Because all eyes were on him. Law enforcement was on him, and the man, the guard that found the holster claims he didn't pick it up, claims it was an empty holster. But you know what? There's something funny about that because I was watching one of the videos about it or in the pretrial hearing, and there was something about a gun being in the holster, but that wasn't in the media. It was he said it was an empty holster, but he was being questioned by defense. I might dig more into that, but why would there be an empty holster? Somebody had a gun in their hand. It's just that's a red flag. That's very suspicious. Zinn's false confession diverted critical police attention away from the manhunt from the suspect. This confusion led a security guard to ignore the holster found on the ground, mistakenly believing the killer was shot. So who was George Zinn? At first, when I was reading about it, he's got a history of doing weird stuff. And so I quickly discounted it in my first timeline video of what happened that day. So at first I thought, what? And then I discounted it, but then I went back to research him, and this is what I found. And that's what this part video is going to be about. It's going to be more about Russia and what's politically going on. So, was he trying to distract the crowd so the real shooter could get away? Could he have a geopolitical connection to Russia? We're going to go deep. We're going to deep dive into that. So what is his history? He was arrested in 2025 for criminally trespassing in Provo. I might dig into that too, but I was interested in something else that he did. He was also arrested for disrupting a Utah Inland Port Authority board meeting. The trespassing is a big one because could he be planning something there? Could he be spying? What could he be doing there? But the 2013 that caught my eye was he pleaded guilty to a threat of terrorism after emailing Salt Lake City Marathon organizers to ask if they needed help placing bombs near the finish line. So he emailed them after there was a bombing during a marathon, some big event where these perpetrators planted bombs and people got hurt and died or whatever. I don't go into too much detail. I might go into a little bit of it. But detectives were on to who it was, close to it. They were closing in, and that's when they got the email from him. So what did they have to do? They had to investigate him. His email went directly to him. He wasn't hiding anything. So then they find out who he was. And then he turns around and says, "Oh, I didn't mean it." So let's go into this. He attempted to interfere by emailing Salt Lake City Marathon and offering to help place bombs near the finish line, mirroring the diversionary tactics he would later use during the Charlie Kirk 2025 shooting. Police traced his email and tracked him down. He claims he did not mean anything by it. He pleaded guilty to a reduced class, a misdemeanor charge, and described the email as a flippant and irresponsible comment. So he told him right off the bat, I shouldn't have said that. He didn't get no jail. And it was made shortly after the bombing occurred. So he's trying to interfere, or supposedly, I think it's a flag because there's a connection. I really think he interfered in the Charlie Kirk murder. But to find out that he did it again here, it's just a red flag. I don't think he's a crazy person. So we're going to get into it. Now, there's one news clipping that says he's from Utah and he's adopted. And that was interesting to me. He's originally from Greece. But let's say he had a record in Europe or anywhere, and he wanted to change his identity. Adoption would be a good way to go. We can't really trace him that easily. So that kind of, I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments. I thought that was kind of, he was adopted. So news people couldn't do any research on him. Apparently that clipping, that's what that was. But let's look into the Boston Marathon bombing that happened in 2013. The 117th running of the Boston Marathon took place on St. Patrick's Day, a Massachusetts state holiday commemorating the Revolutionary War battles of Lexington and Concord. There was 20,000 runners there that morning. The manhunt and capture after the FBI released the photos and video of the suspects on April 18th, a series of violent events unfolded. The suspects killed an MIT police officer, carjacked a vehicle, and were eventually tracked to Watertown, Massachusetts. There was a shootout during a confrontation, and Tamerlan, one of the men, that's his name, Tamerlan, was severely wounded and died after being run over by his brother during an escape attempt. His brother ran him over? I don't remember hearing that. Okay, the capture following a massive house-to-house search and citywide lockdown, he was discovered hiding in a boat. So he was taken into custody. But the marathon bombing happened on April 15th. George Zinn sent that email within a day after the bombing. These guys weren't caught until the 18th and the 19th. So it took investigators away. They're looking for these two bombers, and this guy sends an email. And it's funny because how he did it was, it doesn't really implicate him because it's kind of stupid, but it does take investigators away from the investigation, at least some of them. So let's talk about who they are, because let's say Zinn was related to these guys in organized crime way or a geopolitical way. Let's see who they are. They are ethnically Chechen, which was a part of the USSR. Their legal status is different. One of them was a Russian citizen and a lawful permanent resident of the US who was considered the primary driver of the attack. So he was a Russian citizen. That's weird. In my staging video in part 2, I entertained the thought that Russia had the biggest motive to Charlie Kirk being murdered. And we'll get into that. Again, I get into it a little bit in that video. I'll get into it more in this one. So, that country, Chechnya, Russia had previously bombed them in history. It's a volatile country. There's a lot economics, instability, very poor people. They're disadvantaged country. Now, investigators concluded the brothers were self-radicalized by extremist online material. They acted independently of any known terrorist organizations motivated by a desire to retaliate for U.S. military actions in the Middle East, is what we were told. But when he writes a note on the boat. Here's another note. They seem to be all in these cases. Mangione's note. The mother throws their kids under the bus. Their mother throws them under the bus. Tyler Robinson's mother throws them under the bus. It's just kind of funny. But however, he writes a note on the boat, but later expresses regret and does not admit his motive. So in court at sentencing, he doesn't say anything about his motive. They're mad because of people being killed in another country, not where they're from. So they bombed the US, or they bombed an event in the US. It just seems really strange. That'd be like war going on in Canada and I'm in the US and I decide to get radicalized and go over there or go, let's say it was China bombing Canada, and go to China and throw a bomb over there. It just makes it's very thin motive. Let's put it that way. And he doesn't admit it at sentencing because the motive is apparently the US is killing people in the Middle East, but it's not, we're not killing people in his country where he's originally from. It's just strange. Yeah, there's no court records documenting his motive. That's just weird. It could have been injected media. So there still could be a connection to Russia. And we'll get into it. A lot of people don't know Russian history, but in the 1990s, mafia ruled the streets following the collapse of the Soviet Union. And the mafia controlled private businesses through extortion and open gang warfare. During this period, the state did not control the mafia. Rather, the state was simply too weak to stop them. In the 2000, then Russia ends up transitioning into a mafia state in the 2000s, and absorbs the mafia into their government, creating a symbiotic relationship. And that was when Putin first was supposedly elected president. So instead of fighting the mafia when he came to power, he worked with them. That is why Russia is called a mafia state. So their warcraft and their espionage tools, which I go over in my staging video, um, it's said the Kremlin increasingly uses these criminal groups to conduct operations abroad, including political targeting and financial crime and sabotage. That's what they're known for in Russia. So I don't know about this Candace Owens buddies with Russia over there. It's kind of strange. That's a mafia state. They're loaded with criminals, with organized crime, and they're in charge of everything. And they're super well. They could be super wealthy, organized crime too. So the modern Russian mafia that started in Russia evolved. So the original street gangs, like the Italian mafia here in the US, that was just here in the US, they had a mafia group called the Bravada that was just in Russia, but it's evolved and it's a global network enterprise with operations across post Soviet states, the US, the EU, Israel, and Australia. There's one group, I can't say the name right, based in Moscow, is considered the most powerful Eurasian crime group in the world regarding wealth and influence. The Odessa Mafia group, it's a dominant Russian origin group in the United States, primarily established in Brooklyn's Brighton Beach, with branches in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Now, what's interesting, Epstein is from that area, and there's a mention of Brighton Beach, where there might be a connection between Jeffrey Epstein and a Russian organized crime group in Brighton Beach. And I might dive into that in another video. That's real interesting. I just heard about it when I was doing the Nancy Guthrie, could it be related to the Epstein files in Savannah? And I heard about that. So when this came up, I'm like, that's really interesting. Then there's another group. It's called the Upshina, the largest Chechen mafia group specializing in white-collar crime and kidnapping. Now, these guys were Chechen. We don't know if they were in the mafia. We do know that their mother said that they were a radicalized group, that they were radicalized, that they started acting that way, and they found some online material and they just started joining this group. But we don't really have evidence of that. It was in the news media, but it's not in court documents. So now Ukraine was invaded in 2022, but a lot of people don't know that there was a Russian oligarch that took over Ukraine back in 2015. And there was so much, and he was a criminal. He was like a Russian oligarch, and he was controlling Ukraine. He was like a fake president or something. I don't know how he got into office. That would be fascinating. But the Ukraine people ran him out. They literally ran him out. And somebody picked him up with a helicopter and took him out of that country because the people just like stormed the capital where he was. And they started going through all the papers and they found out all kinds of shenanigans. Then in 2022, Russia invades Ukraine. Now, because of that invasion of Ukraine, the United States and several other countries put sanctions on Russia. So people couldn't buy their oil. They would get in trouble. Other countries couldn't buy their oil. Um, these sanctions on Russia cut off major banks from SWIFT and freezing 300 billion in central bank reserves. While this initially caused Russian billionaires to lose a combined amount of 88 billion. The Russian economy eventually stabilized by rerouting trade towards non-Western partners and alternative currencies like the yuan. Now, I'm getting conflicting reports whether Russia was stable at the time or not stable. Their public was getting increasingly more upset because so many people were dying in the war on Ukraine. And it was putting a financial strain on them. They had sanctions on them. That was the whole point of the sanctions. So it was hurting their economy. So now that we've talked about a little bit of Russia, let's go back to the Charlie Kirk. He did not want war in the Middle East. He was outspoken about it leading up to his death. His followers were America First policy. Now think about it. He was real close to Trump, and he secured 100 million grassroots voters that were America First voters. They were like nationalists. They just wanted us to take care of ourselves. That's in a direct conflict of us going to war in the Middle East in February that we did. Now, when we went to war in February 2026, I don't know what Donald Trump said it was why we were going to war, but I'll tell you the facts of what happened. He fired several FBI agents that were responsible for investigating threats from foreign adversaries, including Iran, before the strikes to Iran, stripping the Bureau of Iran-focused expertise at the worst possible moment. These are facts. You can put two and two together yourself. He also, his first term, did something really weird with a deal in Afghanistan. I hope I have it in my notes. I don't want to talk about it unless I see it in my notes, because I might not say it right. But anyway, let's talk about the war in Iran. What happened was we did escalate a war in the Middle East on February 28th. The U.S.-Israel war is what we call it, with Iran led to the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a vital energy corridor where 20% of the world's oil and LNG passes. So the blockade removed 20 million barrels per day from the market, causing Brent crude prices to skyrocket towards 120 per barrel. We know this because our gas prices went up. We know we're not happy about it. And wasn't Trump waffling back and forth about it's over, and it wasn't over? I remember that. I don't know what's happening now. But what happened to Russia? Because Russia doesn't rely on the Strait of Hormuz for its exports, its crude became highly sought after alternative. The sanctions-driven discount on Russian oil narrowed significantly, with prices jumping from approximately 55 to 125 a barrel, doubling their price per barrel because we cut off the Strait of Hormuz so other oil couldn't go through. That's what we did in February. Russia emerged as the primary state level winner in that. Russia secured a massive federal budget windfall, estimated $13.5 billion by early July. So he's making millions a week in oil, or his Russian oligarchs are, or his Russian billionaire oil people are, which he gets the revenue for, the country does. So during that time, and a lot of people don't know this either, that the Trump administration implemented a series of temporary carve-outs for Russian oil through Treasury OFAC general licenses, which allowed for the sale, payment, and insurance of Russian original crude already loaded on vessels. The waiver began March 12th and was extended twice before finally expiring on June 17th. The rationale was the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent defended the move as necessary measure to stabilize global energy markets during a supply disruption caused by conflict. But what he did was he kind of took off, like you couldn't buy Russian oil because we had sanctions. So he like removed that. He like permitted it to happen for a short period of time during the time where he shut off the Strait to Hormuz. Now, these are all facts. I'm not making it up. You can look it up yourself. This is what happened. Here it is. In 2021, Trump signed the Doha deal with the Taliban, withdrawing troops from Afghanistan, who was not on the negotiation table. And it'll make sense later on. But so he signed a deal with the Taliban, which is a global terrorist entity, and didn't include Afghanistan, that the deal was about removing the troops. So he removed troops in Afghanistan. But instead of negotiating it with Afghanistan, he negotiated with the terrorist group. Dive into that. That's real weird. That's real weird. And you'll find out why it's really weird when I talk about what happened. What did Iran get for this war? They gained temporary oil sanctions relief and potential access to frozen assets. They apparently had frozen assets and they had access to them, though these gains were precarious and offset by the damage of the war and the blockade. So they really didn't get anything. It was like China benefited from the U.S. distraction, but suffered economically as one of the world's largest importers of high-priced Middle Eastern oil. Israel, which we're told that's why we went, that as we're doing it for Israel, that Israel pressured Trump about it. They were completely left out of the deal. No party to the negotiation. Sound familiar? That's what happened when we pulled our troops out of Afghanistan, that Trump signed that. Now, Biden finalized it during his term, but it was already in the works. It was like almost done. But it's just weird that you would make a deal with a terrorist group. That was your whole reason for being there. I don't know. Maybe it's not weird. But I really think it's weird that Israel wasn't in the negotiation deal, which we were told that Israel was behind it, Trump doing this. They got no nuclear dismantlement. Meanwhile, Iran keeps its nuclear program, which was what we believed was the whole reason for the war. Israel officials themselves have called this outcome a slap in the face for the Iranian public in reverse, meaning the war's economic devastation and ordinary Iranians is being undone by the very deal meant to end hostilities. So they got a slap in the face. China didn't get anything. Iran kind of got something in the beginning, but it was offset. And the United States got higher gas prices. And what did Russia get? 13 point March 2026 alone, its oil and fuel export revenue doubled to 19 billion. So it's like 19 billion a month. Who is standing in the way of Trump doing this for Russia? Charlie Kirk. Because it was in the works with this pulling our troops out of Afghanistan. And he must have been planning it because Charlie Kirk was outspoken about it. And even in my video, I have something about him waffling about being on it, being pro-Israel or not pro-Israel. Same thing with Trump waffling about the war being over. He kept waffling back and forth. I don't know. I just know that there's some fishy stuff going on here. We're told one thing, but most Americans do not know that although many countries have sanctions on Russia for invading Ukraine, President Trump, in a sense, voided those sanctions by cutting off that strait so that Russia could sell their oil double the price. So that's the biggest motive that I see. That's why I did another video on it, because I wonder, we don't have evidence that George Zinn was organized crime, or these brothers that committed the marathon bombing was in organized crime. But there's just something fishy about him doing the same thing both times, interfering with the investigation. And there's something fishy about us being told they were terrorists when it's not even, they didn't get charged with that. It wasn't mentioned in court. I can't go back in time that far back to pick apart news media. So I just don't know. Was it injected in the media is that what we were told? Because I would think that would be in court filings. I just can't believe that it wasn't. So anyway, that's my part 3. If you didn't see part 2 or part 1, I'll put the link in the tab on the video. And I might cover the Lindsay Clancy case. I don't want to cover it, but I might cover it from a mental health perspective. I'm not going to watch the case, but I will talk about mental health. I have a mental health background. I was a youth mental health first aid instructor, so I might do a video on that. The barriers to mental health treatment and a history of having a quarter of the psychiatric beds here in the U.S. opposed to Australia. Do you know that we have a quarter of psychiatric beds than Australia does? That's the same size of country of us. So when we talk about barriers to mental health care, I'm going to go into it in a video. So hit like and subscribe so you know when it pops up. It's very interesting, the mental health crisis that we have going on in this country. And I usually give you a mental health tip after each video. And my mental health tip is box breathing. To lower your anxiety, you need to learn how to do box breathing. And box breathing is a box. So you breathe in, out, in, out. That's one. You can do it 2, 3, 4 times. And when you do the inhale, you do a deep diaphragm inhale and a deep exhale. It automatically lowers your anxiety and it automatically will lower a panic attack. If you're having a panic attack, it's because your body's not getting oxygen and it's creating epinephrine that causes that weird feeling and your heart to race and it feels like you're going to have a heart attack. It's because you're not breathing. So people that have high anxiety could have had trauma in the past. It could be many reasons. It could be something going on. You have a stressful month going on, and then you're all of a sudden having a panic attack. It's not that day. It's weeks of not breathing properly. You're just not breathing properly. So learn how to box breathe. If you have bad anxiety, you can set a timer and do it every hour so that you start breathing properly to prevent panic attacks. But it'll help anytime. It's good to have that tool in your toolbox. Even if you don't have anxiety, learn how to do that. So when something pops up and you're faced with, like an anxiety attack, you can learn how to calm yourself down because it doesn't help you to be out of control and full of anxiety and your body charged with a drug that just doesn't make you feel good. So learn how to do box breathing. That's my mental health tip for the day. Please, if you like my video, hit like and subscribe and the notification bell. Have a great day. Thank you.